All right, well, let's get started here. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our May IT Roundtable. Super excited to have Jacqueline Weezy here from FTI, Faith Technologies, to share her insight with us today. Um, just a couple housekeeping things. This is being recorded, and so we will send this out afterwards as well. And Jackie did say that she will send me her slide deck, so we'll share those slides out in a follow-up email as well. If you do have questions, comments, thoughts, ideas throughout her presentation, feel free to either unmute yourself. We love to have conversation, or you can always throw it into the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. And then lastly, just a plug for our next roundtable in June. Our cybersecurity one is going to be from cybersecurity chaos to a world-class program, a battle-tested blueprint for SMBs. And that's going to be done by Nahil Mahom. I can't pronounce his last name. You can see it on there, but he's the founder of Security Transform. And so I'll put that link in the chat. That's going to be on June 25th from noon to 1. So again, our next upcoming one, Cybersecurity Roundtable in June. But with that, I don't want to take any more of Jacqueline's time away. So Jacqueline, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself, and then feel free to take it away.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to join me. And just a quick volume check. Am I sounding all right? Okay. Thanks for the thumbs up. I love that you're all here today. We're talking about a topic that I believe every project manager has faced, or if you're even part of a project team, if you go to work at some point in your life, you've worked on a project. And this is something that has happened to all of us of understanding what type of project are we working on and what is that framework. This, especially as a project manager, we can be stuck in this push and pull and a tension between what should we use, how should we execute. So today, what I want you to receive from this, what I'm hoping the goal will be, this is not a methodology debate. This is going to be serving as a practical guide to help you intentionally set up your projects in a framework that makes sense. How we're going to get there is we're going to talk about what is this identity crisis, and then we're going to talk about what is Waterfall, what is Agile. So whether it's a quick review or totally new to you, I want to talk about these two very common structures for setting up projects. And then what is Wagile, which would be a combination of both. And we're going to talk about the trade-offs. We're going to talk about the trade-offs that happen when you set up Waterfall and when you set up Agile. Then we're going to talk about when it makes sense to have a combination. And I'm going to provide you with a scoring model that's going to help you when you're not sure what type of framework you want to use. So I want you to be able to leave with a practical way to say, all right, I'm thinking about my project, and based on this criteria, it's going to help guide whether you want to set up in a waterfall framework, an agile framework, or a Wagile framework. Then from there, I have a couple of practical standardize and tailoring tips that you want to think about regardless of the framework you use. And then we're going to wrap it all up with the key takeaways and just a little review to surmise what we discussed today. So that is our game plan for the next hour. As we go along, just like we already mentioned, feel free to use the chat, or I cannot necessarily see all of you if you hop off mute, so you can interrupt if need be. It's totally fine. I would like this to be fairly casual today. All right, let's hop right into this identity crisis. So as it stands right now, most organizations do not actually purely follow a Waterfall or an Agile framework. They might say they do, but they're not. And as project managers, we find that we're stuck between competing expectations. Let me give you an example. Your business leadership may have a fixed budget and a timeline, and they want you to follow that. And on the other hand, your product team, your product owner, wants to be creative and iterative, and they want to see where the development goes. And this puts you as a project manager right in the middle. This tension is very normal, and acknowledging that you're caught in this identity crisis is the first step. I like to think of it as if you're on a health journey and you want to lose weight, the first thing you have to do is know how much you weigh. And that is always the first and most horrible step, right? It's the same thing right here, is acknowledging that it is happening and you are feeling that tension on both sides. So when that happens, it is very normal, and it is also important to be intentional. If your project becomes hybrid on accident, you're going to, in the end up leveraging the disadvantages of both approaches instead of the advantages of both approaches. I know I've been there early on in my career. I was definitely trying to please everyone instead of be intentional with frameworks. So I was trying to run a waterfall project in DevOps. And then other times I was trying to make things just fit in ways that they weren't supposed to, possibly the other way, using project and trying to be somewhat nimble in it. And you can make that work, but it's not always the best. Granted, there are times where you have the tools your company has and you have to make it work. But if you can leverage things intentionally from the get-go, your project will run smoother. So let's talk about why it matters. I've been hinting about this, but the why do we even care? The choice matters because when you choose wrong, which can happen, it does impact cost and it impacts risk. Let me give you a thought of a waterfall example. Let's say your stakeholders want a green button developed, and you send it off to a dev team, and let's say it takes 3 sprints to develop a green button. Those of you who are fellow IT project managers know something that sounds simple often isn't. 3 sprints later, you develop a green button, you demo it to your end users, and you find out they wanted light green. This can be a disadvantage of waterfall. You have now wasted time, you have wasted money, and you did not get your feedback early enough, and you have complete rework. Had we used an agile approach, we would have shown them and found out we had the wrong color green earlier on. So it does impact cost. It does affect stakeholder satisfaction. By contrast, if we were not following a timeline that was heavily regulated, which Waterfall helps enforce, and we were being very iterative, we're also not meeting not meeting our governance, not meeting our regulations, and our stakeholders are still dissatisfied as we're missing important deadlines or potentially not fulfilling laws. So these is some examples of why our methodology is important, and it needs to be a strategic decision, not a personal preference. This is something I really challenge, especially veteran project managers. Sometimes you, so to say, grow up in your career with a methodology that you learned. Typically, those of you who have been in project management for decades, you probably started with Waterfall. And Waterfall can feel comfortable because you've just worked in it, and Agile still feels new. And it is important to challenge yourself to think, yes, my preference is Waterfall, but is Waterfall really appropriate for my project? So that is something, as we go through this today, that I challenge you to think about on your own projects and if they're framed up in the way that is best for the project. I'm going to pause here. Are we doing okay? Speed okay? Any questions? Chat looks clear. All right. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to really level set on our definitions of Agile, Waterfall, pros and cons. At its heart, when you're thinking about Agile, it offers delivering value through continuous feedback and adoption. And it can work so well when you have uncertainty and evolving environments. And I'm going to give you an example. I work at FTI now. Previously, I had spent a lot of time working in IT for the airlines. And one of the projects, actually one of my favorite projects that I got to work on, is we made an app from idea to fruition about recruiting new pilots. This was an agile project where we had the opportunity to code the application and then got to build it as we go. Things that happened in this project really were exciting because we demoed and then we saw the features. We got to see it work on an iPad. We found that we got to keep the HR team was really involved because they got to see it and change. At that time, for those of you that use, it was built in React. We use Material UI, so we got to go in and see the little drop downs, and it was pretty new at the time. And we got to show them, do you want to see the text go in this line, or would you like to see it in a bubble? So it was really exciting to use that continuous feedback loop to help design the look and feel of the app. In fact, you wouldn't believe that we spent a week deciding on the format for a phone number. It's a thing. Parentheses, dashes, straight line, lots of time there. But Agile was extremely powerful in this space for our delivery. And had that been Waterfall, I can imagine what would have happened. Tons of rework. The amount of changes that we did as we went through, it just would have resulted in a lot of rework, and it would have cost a lot of extra money and time. By contrast, another project that I had worked on, when we think about Waterfall, executing projects in a structured sequential planning, opening up a new station. So thinking about when an airline needs to set up at a new city, right? When they set up at a new city, this is highly regulated by the FAA. And it's almost what I would call a prescription or a recipe. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. Now, this is more of an infrastructure project in IT, but it's very clear. You have to set up the Wi-Fi. You have to have this type of computer, all of these different things, what the firewall calls for. And you have to follow all the regulations that are needed for safety and security inside an airport. This is a perfect example of when Waterfall is important. Agile is not, I'm not going to put that in a Agile setting. We're not really going to iterate. We don't need to do demos, but we do need to get the work done, and it needs to be done in a certain order, and it needs to be very structured to check all of the boxes. It also fit well for Waterfall because it was repeatable. Then we can take that, we made a playbook, and then we followed it in other cities. So those are just two examples that I personally experienced that I thought were closer to pure Agile and Waterfall as we go through. When we think about these thoughts in approaches in conflict, I now just want all of you to start to think about your own projects, right? I just shared two examples of mine. As we go through, I just want you to reflect on uh, any pure or close to pure waterfall projects that you may have had, or close to pure agile projects that you have had. And then outside of the two examples that I just gave you, I would say pretty much every other project I've ever worked on for the last 15 years has fallen in the middle. How about you guys? I can see a few of you nodding. Are you finding most of your projects also fall in the middle? I'm seeing some thumbs. And we're going to talk about Wagile a little as we go. And I want to note that none are inherently, no approach is inherently better than the other, but the conflict arises when your organization may try to force one approach when really the project needs another. When we think back to that station opening, if I had to run that agile, it really would have been a disservice. If we would have built the app in Waterfall, it would have been a disservice to the project as well. It still would have gotten done, but it wouldn't have gotten done as fast or as effectively. Thinking about Waterfall specifically now and its strengths. This is and has been around longer, but I want you to know that doesn't mean that anything is wrong with this approach. This approach has been around a long time because it is effective. When you have predictability, it is its number one strength. When you can commit to a contract, an auditor, when we think about industries like defense, healthcare, construction, they rely on Waterfall, and that is for absolute good reason. It builds credibility. It works with highly regulated environments. It is compliance ready, and it offers very strong governance. I often, every time I think about Waterfall, I think about it as just those requirements literally going down in that waterfall as you look at it as a project manager, and you are ensuring that those requirements are met from top to bottom as you work through. What can happen, as we alluded to, and it is important just to know where this falls short. The absolute biggest pain point that I'm stressing again is the late validation. And you need to be aware of this as a project manager, that when you use Waterfall, the team may wait months to see a result and it might be wrong. So if you're having something where you're going to have user acceptance testing, if they're not seeing it till late, you may be starting back months of work. The product may absolutely miss the mark. The Standish group actually reported that 50% of waterfall features are rarely or never used. I think we see this as project managers as well, that sometimes you spend all this time on a project or a piece of software, and then later you check in and you ask how it's been going, and you find out no one's using it and they're still using Excel or whatever was uh, the pain point that started the project in the first place. And it hints to you something missed the mark. It didn't hit the requirements they were looking for in the first place if they're still using the old system and haven't changed over, whether they just don't understand how it works or it flat out didn't hit the requirements. And that always hints to me, maybe was Waterfall part of the problem? Did we not gather our requirements well enough? Do we need to iterate? Do we need to go back? And still room for continuous improvement. that being said, that is Waterfall in a nutshell as we think of our framework. I often see tools where you're going to have Waterfall. MS Project, although for those of you that know, MS Project is sunsetting, I believe, in September. So then Microsoft wants to send you over to Planner, which is wildly different than MS Project. Also, I see Smartsheet is a pretty great common tool for Waterfall as well. And I'm sure there are several others out there that can use Waterfall. I've even seen people use Excel to help move along Waterfall projects. Okay. Now, jumping over to Agile. Agile can mean, when we think of it as Scrum Agile, Agile in this context, working to deliver software early. So this is more, I want you to know that Agile is more than just our ceremonies. I think sometimes project teams think they're Agile in name because they say, oh, we have stand-ups, we have retros, we're Agile. But really nothing else is Agile other than asking what you worked on yesterday, what you're working on, and if you have blockers. Not that that isn't a valuable exercise, but that doesn't truly make your team Agile. Agile is really about delivering something, getting feedback, and then changing if needed. And that early value to delivery, it helps reduce financial risk. It also really drives involvement from your stakeholders. You can find a lot of buy-in when they're starting to see what they want delivered. You can find you get better testing and they start to have ownership when you're starting to see what they're asking for take shape. So definitely better engagement, and it can lead to faster delivery overall. Also should catch defects quicker. So sometimes with Waterfall, you find the bug, but it's kind of like when you're working on a math problem, that mistake, you got 10 wrong because 9 up, you made an arithmetic mistake. Agile tries to catch that so you don't cascade mistakes as you go. It tries to catch it early so you can fix bugs and have cleaner development as you move through. You also can stop a project if you're finding out that the requirements are changing. So it can be a very effective approach. Speaking of tools, a lot of times you're going to see Agile in Jira, DevOps. You're starting to see your Kanban boards assisting you to visualize work as it moves through our improvement and just watching our work move through the cycle. However, just like Waterfall, Agile has its limitations as well. It is not a silver bullet. One of the biggest limitations or drawbacks of Agile is scope creep. As project managers, that word maybe also sent shivers on your arms. Scope creep is such a risk when you're using Agile. You're trying to finish your project as scoped at hand, but there is this amazing thing, the spirit, and it is the intent of you start seeing what your development can do, and then your stakeholders' minds start thinking where it can go, which is a wonderful thing. However, it can wildly change your timelines. It can wildly change your scope and what you're trying to deliver. And then what you're trying to manage can completely get out of hand. So what is very, very important when you're running an Agile project that you can maintain the scope and set what you're trying to do without upsetting your stakeholders. So in the spirit of trying to get something done and make it exciting and then also not disappointing them. So it's something you have to be really careful on is that scope creep. There's also no fixed baseline. So when we start to think about when you're running sprints, you have a sprint, you're pulling in some of your user stories and thinking about the work you want to do, but it's not as governed as a waterfall project. And those deadlines can be more nebulous, and that can be harder to maintain expectations. Maybe the end users are comfortable with that, but the leadership team is not. So it can make for new challenges as project managers of making sure that we're keeping all of our stakeholders and leadership on the same page of the expectations of delivery. All right, that leads us into Wagile. Uh, Wagile, also, I wanted to pause here. Do you guys want to put in the chat? Do you have any other names for Wagile? Wagile is what I've heard, but what have you guys heard it called? Any other things? Ooh, water gel. I like that. Hybrid. Oh, I heard another agree with hybrid. Anyone hear Scrumfall? I've heard that one a lot. The internet also suggested to me fragile, and I guess it's jokingly used when the combination isn't working well. Oh, Scrummerfall. Okay, that's kind of fun. It also suggested cherry-picked agile, so you're only using small parts of it, or AINO, agile in name only. So you're calling yourself agile, but you're really not doing anything agile. You're setting up a waterfall project that you call agile. And thank you for those. Well, whatever you call it, it is just combining that hybrid approach of both. And this is, as I mentioned early in the beginning, it really is what most large enterprises are already practicing, whether or not you're calling it. You're just finding as people from different disciplines join a company, they have different experiences, and it tends to lead to blending. Many times, what I have seen is that the development team is running in sprints. So you might be setting up sprints, whether you're the Scrum Master or you're working with the Scrum Master, you're in DevOps, you're in Jira, those ceremonies are going on. And then in addition to that, you're setting up a traditional project management, in my case, a smart sheet, where I'm carrying over those features and I'm putting them in a reporting tool that's set up somewhat like Waterfall so I can report up to leadership. Anybody else in that boat where that's kind of what you're doing, both of them at the same time? You can give a thumbs up if anybody is. Maybe it's just me. Oh, I see some. Yes, I think we find that whether it's tools or your audiences, what you're noting up to senior leadership, that there are different reporting tools. That is something I found myself in at a couple different companies, that I had to carry over what I saw in a feature or an epic and then just roll that into what looked like a waterfall plan so leadership understood what we were doing. And to some degree, that works all right. It lets the development team do what they need to do, but also keeps a little bit of governance on staying on task according to the key features that we're expecting on a timeline. And if you design that intentionally, you can stick to the goals of that project. I've also found when you first charter your project and you're working on your work breakdown structure, when you're setting up a Wagile environment, really thinking about that work breakdown structure and trying to do that tie. So if you need to, tying milestones which would be in that waterfall setting, to your key deliverables, just depending on how your Agile is set up, whether it's a feature or an epic. Cross tying those intentionally can work really well to maintain some control over what's happening, not having scope creep, but still allowing your dev team flexibility to develop in a way that's meaningful to them and having that continuous feedback. The other thing that I've found can work really well when you're in a Wagile environment and you have all that creativity flowing. Once people see how they can iterate, start a backlog. So I have found, they're testing, they're excited. They're like, oh, that green button. Now can we make a blue button over here? And can I have a purple circle? I hear you. I will write that down and we will consider that for a future phase. That helps their voices heard. You will log it. It can be a future requirement, whether that's you, your business analyst. It keeps them happy and it can be a very good idea, but it does help harness that scope creep that can often happen when you're toying with Agile. I also want to note, it's not just me. Don't take my word for it. There's some big companies that are doing this. So did some research and saw these are some examples. IBM, they offer doing a structured approach here. So when they look at what they're doing, they combine program management, that's waterfall, but then they have agile development. So, they take all of their projects that they're working on, those are running agile, but then that program manager oversees it and orchestrates that those projects are being delivered sequentially and stand up to deliver their different programs. Amazon, I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that company, but they also run agile product squads, but they have to maintain operational standards that fall under waterfall. So their project managers are tasked with that balance of things have to be done in waterfall, kind of what we described. Where they log it, I'm not privy to that information, but they have to orchestrate standards in waterfall agile teams. And Google, so they balance innovational sprints, right? So they have sprints going, but enterprise governance for cloud products. So it just depends on what area of the business you work in there that are doing these types of practices as well. And then another example would be in finance. So this is a broad example, but when you think about the finance industry, thank you, ChatGPT, on this one. It tells me that it's going to have those gates where they're going to be fixed, and then they're running sprints underneath to develop what needs to be done to hit those compliance. And when you think about another example of a large IT project would be like an enterprise, right, an ERP system here, enterprise resource planning. When you think of something of that magnitude, that type of implementation, you're going to have phased milestones that are very much governing the program management, but those modules or features could be built out iteratively, and they might need to change them as they're coding and building them as they go. So those could be some real life examples of watching a blend work quite well. All right, so just thinking about in our quick review on waterfall, stable requirements, regulation, fixed contracts, infrastructure, low uncertainty, meaning high certainty. Quite sure why I worded it that way. That's when we're thinking about waterfall. Agile, high uncertainty. Customer-facing apps, innovation, frequent feedback, rapid iteration, right? Those are the two separately. Now, what should I use? This is what I would recommend when you're thinking about your own project. You just get assigned, it comes out of governance, your name lands as the project manager. Truly sitting down and being intentional about your framework. And this is a very simple exercise, but simply score. Oh, and I got double fives. I'm sorry. I'll clean that up before I send out the slide deck. But score 1 to 5, right? High being very uncertain, very dynamic, and 5 being very stable and control for each of these, and then take an average. And once you have that average, uh, it will tell you if it's lower, you're on the agile side. If it's higher, you're on waterfall. And if that average falls just in that middle of the 2, 3, 4, you're going to be Wagile. And this is going to help you think intentionally about what you might need to do, how you might need to talk to your stakeholders, if you're going to need to possibly set up maybe that dual system where you have to log in 2 places, thinking of leadership, or if you're going to run pure one way or the other. So I do recommend trying this exercise out, being intentional as you set up your projects. And it really only takes about just thinking it through, maybe 15 minutes after you've already investigated your project charter. After that, you've now are out of your identity crisis. You've chosen your correct identity and you've used logic, not passion, not comfort with a tool, but you're really putting logic behind it. And this doesn't need to be a one-time decision. You can revisit this as your project evolves. So if you're finding that the worst out case here is that you need to pivot as you go through, if the needs change, if the stakeholders aren't responding or you're not getting the results or you accidentally chose wrong, pivot. I think that's the biggest thing to note as project managers, also reminding to iterate our own tools and own strategies if they're not working. The last thing that I want to note is that once you've chosen, it doesn't mean that even though you're in a pure waterfall or agile lane, that you also might need to tailor a little bit. And let me give you an example. I'm just going to use the idea of a restaurant chain. We'll just pick like a McDonald's, let's say, or whatever restaurant chain you might want to eat at, and instead you can't eat right now because you're on the call with me, or maybe you're not on camera and you are. Either's fine. But let's think about a restaurant chain. If there's a McDonald's here in Wisconsin and it's 30 below, and then there's a restaurant chain in southern Florida and it's 80 degrees, they still have the same standards. So they chose a methodology and the way the franchise works, and they need to set things up the same. However, there's going to be slight idiosyncrasies of the rules and regulations that deal with health and safety, because in one place it's freezing and the other place it's really warm. So the thermostat's going to be set a little different. The safety protocols for the team that takes care of the parking lot, they're going to have slightly different, one's shoveling or snow plowing, the other needs to maintain the lawn or watering or what have you. So that's what we're talking about when you're just tailoring slightly your delivery based on the project, even if you are in a standardized methodology. Same thing with tailoring your ceremonies. Even though you're in an agile environment, don't have a ceremony just to have a ceremony. Really think about, is it adding value? What sort of feedback are you getting from the team? If you're having a stand-up every single day and no one's talking, you might want to think, what's happening there? Are we adding value? Is the team not talking? Are they trying to diagnose if it's needed? I have seen some teams go to 3 days a week and it's added more value. I've even seen some teams do on Fridays, they have a virtual stand up where they just type in what they're working on and type in if they have any blockers, and if they need to hop on a call, they do. So just tailoring slightly to see what your project ultimately needs, as each project has its very own personality. So our key takeaways: fit the method to the project, fit the method. Hybrid is very common, and that is okay. We're always trying to focus on our outcomes as we move forward and getting that team to delivering on time, staying on scope, and being on budget, our iron triangle, and always driving intentional decisions in our framework. So that way we know who we are and we have our true identity. So that really leads as far as what I would like to show you for new content. And I wanted to open it up for questions or discussion.
Again, feel free to unmute yourself or throw any of your questions, comments, thoughts in the chat.
One thing I would be curious about is, has anyone, oh, we do got one. Okay. All right, so you do the 3 stand-ups a week. Thank you for that. Has anyone else found, just out of curiosity, are you mostly finding that you're doing hybrid? Yes. Is anyone in there forced to do one methodology that your organization just prefers, that you're a strict waterfall shop or a strict agile shop? Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. Hybrid is planning agile, but still executing waterfall. Rob, I see that too. Waterfall reporting, agile execution. I think thumbs up from other people. Are you finding that too, that you're waterfall reporting, but agile execution? Lots of thumbs. Lots of thumbs.
Wow.
Wow. And I wonder if that is still organizations catching up to Agile in some ways, that it is still uh, being adapted as we're trying to understand what reporting looks like that way. Reporting waterfall, planning Agile, executing waterfall. Okay. Fair. That's lots of back and forth. Has anyone ever tried the scoring model before? Just the exercise? Well, that might be a fun next step for you, just to try it. It also will give you some leverage if you are, thank you, if you are being asked, if the team says, why are we running it this way? We love running waterfall. We love running agile. It's what we've always done. It's what we want to do. It's why we're comfortable. This will give you some leverage to say, this is why I want to run the project this way. I want to make an intentional decision based on how we're thinking about it, the certainty, uncertainty of the project itself. That's thanks for sharing that. It can happen that there can be some bias against agile. The scope creep is real, um, and I have found the only way I've been able to overcome it is creating that backlog. Otherwise, you're letting your end users down or your stakeholders down if you're not hearing them what they want to add, and but also trying to drive that the project at hand is getting done.
Anything else for Jacqueline? Or Jacqueline, any other questions, thoughts from you?
I just have a quick question.
Nothing more. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
great. Hi, Michael Rogers. I'm at the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and I was just wondering, what do you think our students need to know? Because I pretty much do everything in an agile framework, sort of, or slightly organized chaos, and I just wonder if they. Yeah, and I talked briefly about waterfall, but I do everything agile, and I don't know any other way to do it. What's your thought on that?
Uh, well, first I'd like to poll the group here by thumbs just to see if it's not, how many people still use Waterfall in some way at their company. So, Michael, if you're watching the thumbs,
Yes.
that might that might
Okay.
give you a little indication that uh, out there in the industry there's still a lot of waterfall happening.
Hmm.
And there is some agile, but taking some time to touch on it and noting that it is still being used and how it's being used, and even noting some of the pros and cons and being deliberate about it, especially, I think, as a lot of people wrote in here, that waterfall reporting. I think it comes down to a lot of times leadership ultimately is, needs to understand if things are being regulated, um, it's getting done, when it's getting done, and what percent it's done. And even if you're in an agile environment, you're still having to find a way to answer that question. That perhaps if someone's truly working on a dev project of building a new app, that might be give them some timeline. In the example I gave you about building that recruiting app, we were told we had 18 months, and then we got to play inside that 18 months and build out our own sprints. That was the closest I've ever been to true agile, but that was a luxury.
Hmm.
I see Lisa put that too. Does anyone think they're running true agile? Any thumbs out there for true agile?
Couple of lonely thumbs.
But that might even be helpful for you just to note the state of the state.
Yes, I think so. Very, very helpful. By the way, will the recording of this be available afterwards?
Yes, we'll send out the recording as well as the slide deck. Might not get to it today, but yes, we'll send that out post call here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I just want to say that I found this very helpful and educational.
Oh, thank you. And in my organization, we definitely have a blend. We have some teams that are running. Uh, One of the lonely thumbs there was one of my teams that is running in agile, but then there are other parts of our business technology shop that are running hybrid or waterfall. So you might find that too, that different facets of the IT shop might be running in Waterfall or Agile or hybrid overall. Any other questions or comments?
Any final thoughts from you, Jacqueline?
Just a thank you. I really appreciate the time, the feedback, the comments. It is something that I've personally wrestled with, which is why I try to investigate more myself. And my hope is just if you've learned one little thing or just had a refresher from an old favorite that you've learned about in the past, and just revisit it and rethink of it today, I hope it was worth your time. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jacqueline, to you for taking the time out yourself here today as well to share your knowledge. You see, you're getting all the love here now. So truly, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Thanks to all of you for attending today. As I mentioned earlier, we do have our cybersecurity roundtable coming up in June. So I put that in the chat. But thanks again. Have a safe and fun upcoming holiday weekend. And we'll kick off the summer. It's here, hopefully. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.